Arizona Territory. 18 for 7. The dust swirled like the devil's own dance as shouts echoed through Tombstone's Main Street. Sister Magdalena stood on the auction block, her white habit torn and stained, dark eyes blazing with defiance even as iron shackles bound her wrists. The crowd of rough miners and drifters jeered and called out bids, treating this holy woman like cattle. But in the shadows of the saloon, a figure in black watched with cold, calculating eyes, a man whose cold point for 5 had spoken the final word in more arguments than most folks had seen sunrises. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town of Esperanza, casting long shadows across the dusty Main Street. It was the kind of heat that made even the rattlesnakes seek shade. Yet the crowd gathered around the makeshift auction platform seemed oblivious to the scorching rays. Jeremiah Stone adjusted his black hat and spurred his horse forward, the animal's hooves clicking against the hard-packed earth. The tall gunslinger had ridden into town following whispers of trouble, the kind that usually meant easy money for a man of his particular skills. But what he saw on that platform made his jaw tighten beneath his dark stubble. A woman in nun's robes stood with her head held high despite the chains around her wrists. Her habit was torn in places, revealing the simple brown dress beneath, but her dignity remained intact. Sister Magdalena, as he would later learn her name, possessed the kind of beauty that transcended her holy calling, olive skin kissed by the desert sun, dark hair partially visible beneath her white coif, and eyes that burned with an inner fire that no earthly hardship could extinguish. "What'll it be, gentlemen?" hollered Silas Blackwood, the town's most notorious slave trader, his gold teeth gleaming as he grinned. "This here's prime goods, young, healthy, and Lord knows she's got spirit. Do I hear $50? The crowd erupted in a cacophony of voices. Rough miners, cattle ranchers, and drifters called out their bids, treating the holy woman like livestock. Sister Magdalena's lips moved silently in what Jeremiah assumed was prayer, but her eyes never showed fear, only a burning determination that spoke of unshakable faith. "60, shouted a burly man with arms like tree trunks. "75, countered another, his clothes marking him as a prosperous rancher. Jeremiah dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post outside Murphy's saloon. His spurs jingled softly as he walked, the sound somehow cutting through the noise of the auction. Several men in the crowd noticed his approach and stepped aside. His reputation as one of the fastest guns in the territory preceded him wherever he went. The gunslinger studied the situation with the cold calculation of a man who had survived countless deadly encounters. Blackwood was flanked by 4 armed men, all of them the type who shot first and never bothered with questions. The crowd was mostly unarmed townsfolk and miners, but a few carried sidearms. $100. The bid came from a man Jeremiah recognized: Marcus Whitmore, owner of the largest cattle ranch in 3 counties. Whitmore was known for his cruelty to both animals and people, and the thought of this holy woman falling into his hands made something dark and cold settle in Jeremiah's chest. Sister Magdalena's eyes found his across the crowd. For a moment, time seemed suspended as their gazes locked. He saw no plea for help in those dark depths, only a quiet acceptance of whatever fate God had planned for her. It was that very lack of desperation that moved him more than any tearful begging could have. "Go in once," Blackwood called out, his voice carrying over the crowd. $100 for this fine specimen. Jeremiah stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the grip of his Colt. $200. The crowd fell silent. Even Blackwood's grin faltered for a moment as he took in the tall figure in black. Everyone in this part of Arizona knew about Jeremiah Stone, the man who had faced down the Dalton brothers single-handed, who had cleaned up 3 towns from here to California, leaving a trail of outlaws' graves in his wake. Well, Blackwood recovered his composure, though his voice carried a nervous edge. "Mr. Stone honors us with his presence. 200 it is. Do I hear more?" Whitmore scowled and opened his mouth to bid higher, but his foreman whispered urgently in his ear. The rancher's face went pale as he apparently remembered who he would be bidding against. He stepped back into the crowd without another word. "Going once, going twice." Blackwood's eyes swept the silent crowd. No one dared challenge the gunslinger's bid. "Sold. to Mr. Stone for $200. Jeremiah pulled a leather pouch from his coat and counted out the gold coins, each one ringing against the wooden platform as he placed it in Blackwood's outstretched palm. The slave trader's men unlocked Sister Magdalena's shackles, though they kept their hands on their weapons. "Pleasure doing business with you, Stone," Blackwood said, but his eyes held a warning. "Hope you enjoy your purchase." Sister Magdalena walked down from the platform with steady steps, her head still held high. When she reached Jeremiah, she looked up at him with those remarkable dark eyes. "I am Sister Magdalena of the Order of the Sacred Heart," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of Spanish heritage. "I assume you have reasons for what you have done, Sigor." "Name's Jeremiah Stone, sister, and yes, I reckon I do." He gestured toward his horse. "We best be moving. This town ain't safe for either of us now." As they walked toward his horse, Jeremiah could feel the eyes of the crowd following them. Some were curious, others hostile. Blackwood and his men watched with particular interest, no doubt planning how they might reclaim their lost merchandise. "I cannot ride astride a horse, Mr. Stone," Sister Magdalena said quietly. "My vows, your vows won't matter much if we're dead, sister." Jeremiah untied his horse and swung into the saddle. "Sometimes survival requires bending the rules." She hesitated for a moment, then accepted his outstretched hand and allowed him to pull her up behind him. Her arms wrapped around his waist as he spurred the horse into motion, and they rode out of Esperanza with the desert wind whipping around them. They rode hard for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and the town. Jeremiah chose a winding path through the rocky hills, using every trick he knew to obscure their trail. Sister Magdalena held on without complaint, though he could feel her tension through the thin fabric of her habit. When they finally stopped beside a small stream hidden in a grove of cottonwood trees, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Jeremiah helped her down from the horse, noting how she immediately smoothed her robes and adjusted her coif with practiced motions. "Why?" she asked simply, settling on a fallen log beside the stream. Jeremiah loosened his horse's cinch and allowed the animal to drink. "Why what, sister? Why did you pay $100 for me? I have no money to repay you, and I will not." She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. "Didn't buy you to use you," Jeremiah said, settling against a tree trunk. "Bought you to free you." Sister Magdalena studied his weathered face, searching for deception and finding none. "I do not understand. Men like you do not spend their money on acts of charity. Men like me." There was amusement in his voice. "What kind of man am I, sister? A killer," she said without hesitation. "I can see it in your eyes, in the way you move. Death follows you like a shadow." Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "You're not wrong. I've killed men, sister, more than I care to count. But I've never killed a man who didn't need killing, and I've never hurt someone who couldn't defend themselves, and that makes it righteous in your eyes. Don't know about righteous, but it makes it necessary." He looked at her directly. "How does a nun end up on a slave auction block in a place like Esperanza?" Sister Magdalena's hands folded in her lap, and for the first time, he saw her composure waver slightly. "I was traveling with a missionary group to establish a school for Indian children near the border. We were attacked by banditos 3 days ago. They killed the others. Brother Francisco, Sister Teresa, young Miguel, who was our guide." Her voice grew soft. "I alone survived." "Why didn't they kill you too?" "They said I was too valuable to waste a bullet on." Her laugh held no humor. "They brought me to Esperanza to sell me. Sigor Blackwood told me I should be grateful they did not simply use me and leave my body for the vultures." Jeremiah felt that familiar cold anger settling in his chest again. "These banditos have names." Their leader called himself El Serpiente. He had a scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. She looked at him sharply. "I can see what you are thinking, Mr. Stone. Violence will not bring back my brothers and sisters in Christ." "No," Jeremiah agreed, "but it'll make sure they don't kill any more missionaries." Sister Magdalena was quiet for a long time, listening to the gentle sound of the stream. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I prayed as I stood on that platform. I prayed for deliverance, for strength, for the souls of my murdered companions. But I also prayed." She paused, as if the words were difficult to form. "I prayed for someone to save me, and when I saw you in the crowd, for a moment I thought God had answered my prayers. Maybe he did." She shook her head. "God does not work through men like you, Mr. Stone. God is love, mercy, forgiveness. You are," she gestured helplessly, "you are violence incarnate, and yet here you are, free instead of in Whitmore's bed tonight." Jeremiah's voice was gentle, but his words cut deep. "Maybe your God works in ways you don't understand, sister." "Sister." Magdalena stood abruptly and walked to the edge of the stream. She knelt and cupped water in her hands, drinking deeply, and then splashing some on her face. When she turned back to him, her expression was troubled. "I have devoted my life to God," she said. "I took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. I believed that faith alone was sufficient to overcome any trial. But standing on that platform, listening to those men bid on me like I was a horse or a cow." She shuddered. "I felt hatred, Mr. Stone, pure, burning hatred, and I wanted them to suffer for what they had done. That makes you human, not faithless, does it? The Bible teaches us to turn the other cheek, to forgive our enemies. But I find I cannot forgive the men who killed my friends. I cannot forgive Blackwood for treating me like merchandise, and I cannot understand why God would allow such evil to exist in his world." Jeremiah stood and walked to where she stood. "By the water's edge. I'm not a religious man, sister, but I've seen enough of this world to know that evil exists. And I've learned that sometimes the only way to stop evil is with a gun. That is not what the Lord teaches. The Lord also said there's a time for everything under heaven, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for peace and a time for war." He met her gaze steadily. "Maybe this is one of those times for war." As night fell, they made a small camp. In the shelter of the trees, Jeremiah built a tiny fire, keeping it small to avoid attracting attention. Sister Magdalena sat across from him, her white coif ghostly in the flickering light. "Where will you take me?" she asked. "There's a convent in Santa Fe, the Sisters of Mercy. They'll take you in. That is nearly 200 miles from here. It's a hard journey," Jeremiah admitted, "but it's the closest safe place I know." Sister Magdalena stared into the flames. "I am not certain I wish to return to the convent." Jeremiah looked up from checking his weapons. "What do you mean?" "I mean that my faith has been shaken. How can I minister to others when I question God's mercy myself? How can I teach children about divine love when I have seen such cruelty go unpunished? Faith without doubt ain't faith at all, sister. It's just blind following. Is that supposed to comfort me? It's supposed to make you think." Jeremiah holstered his pistol and leaned back against his saddle. "I knew a preacher once, down in Texas, good man, devoted to his calling, but he told me something I never forgot. He said the strongest faith comes from wrestling with God, not from never questioning him." Sister Magdalena pulled her thin blanket around her shoulders. "And what did you think of his words?" "I thought they made sense. A faith that can't survive questions probably ain't worth having." They fell into silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jeremiah took the first watch, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond their small circle of light. Sister Magdalena lay down with her back to the fire, but he could tell from her breathing that sleep eluded her. "Mr. Stone," she said quietly, "thank you for what you did today. Don't thank me yet, sister. We've got a long way to go." The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Jeremiah woke to the sound of horses approaching and immediately rolled to his feet, his Colt appearing in his hand as if by magic. Sister Magdalena sat up, her eyes wide with fear. "Well, well," came a familiar voice. Mr. Stone and his expensive purchase. Blackwood emerged from the trees, flanked by his gunmen. All of them had their weapons drawn and trained on the camp. The slave trader's gold teeth gleamed in the morning light as he smiled. "Afraid I'm going to have to ask for my merchandise back, Stone. Seems there was a problem with the bill of sale." Jeremiah kept his gun steady, though he was outnumbered 4-1. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where you don't get to keep what you bought." Blackwood's smile widened. "See, the good sister here is wanted for murder. killed a man down in Mexico before she took her vows. There's a bounty on her head." "That's a lie," Sister Magdalena said, rising to her feet. "I have never killed anyone. Mexican authorities say different. $500, dead or alive." Blackwood's eyes glittered with greed. "That's more than double what you paid for." Her Jeremiah knew it was a lie. Blackwood's type would say anything to justify their actions. But he also knew that the truth wouldn't matter if they were all dead. He counted his options and found them limited. Even if that were true, Jeremiah said carefully, you'd need proof, a warrant or a wanted poster. "Oh, I got proof." Blackwood reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "Right here. Magdalena Vasquez, wanted for the murder of Don Carlos Mendoza in Guadalajara." Sister Magdalena gasped. "Carlos is dead." The slip was small, but Blackwood caught it immediately. His grin became predatory. "So you do know the name. Interesting." Jeremiah saw the trap closing around them. Sister Magdalena's face had gone pale, and he could see the weight of some secret knowledge in her eyes. Whatever the truth was, Blackwood had stumbled onto something real. "Don't matter what paper you got," Jeremiah said. "You want her, you'll have to go through me." "Now that's a shame, Stone. I was hoping we could do this peaceful-like." Blackwood nodded to his men. "Kill him. Take the woman." The gunfight erupted in an explosion of smoke and thunder. Jeremiah dove behind a fallen log, his colt barking as he fired. One of Blackwood's men spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, seeking cover among the trees. Sister Magdalena threw herself flat against the ground as bullets whined overhead. Through the chaos, she heard Jeremiah's voice shouting for her to stay down. The battle was brief but intense. Jeremiah's reputation as a gunfighter was well earned, and despite being outnumbered, his superior skill and the advantage of cover began to tell. Another of Blackwood's men fell, this time permanently, a bullet through his heart. "This ain't over." "Stone," Blackwood called out as he and his remaining men retreated through the trees. "That bounty money's too good to pass up." Jeremiah remained crouched behind the log until the sound of hoof beats faded into the distance. Only then did he emerge and check on Sister Magdalena. "You hurt?" he asked, helping her to her feet. She shook her head, but her hands were trembling. "Carlos is really dead? You know this Don Carlos?" Sister Magdalena's eyes filled with tears. "He was my brother." The revelation hung in the air between them like smoke from gunpowder. Jeremiah holstered his weapon and began gathering their gear with swift, efficient movements. "We need to move. They'll be back with more men." As they rode away from the blood-stained campsite, Sister Magdalena began to speak. Her voice was low, almost lost beneath the sound of hoof beats, but Jeremiah listened to every word. "My name was not always Magdalena," she said. "I was born Isabella Vasquez, daughter of a wealthy landowner near Guadalajara. Carlos was my older brother, heir to our father's estate. What happened? Our father died when I was 18. Carlos inherited everything, including the debts our father had hidden from us. To save the family lands, he began working with men who were not honorable, bandits, smugglers, men who preyed on others. They rode in silence for a while, climbing into the foothills where the terrain was rougher but offered more concealment." Sister Magdalena continued her story in fragments, as if each word caused her pain. "I tried to convince him to find another way, but Carlos said we had no choice. It was work with these men, or lose everything our family had built over generations. The money was good, and at first it seemed we might save the ranch, but it didn't work out that way, no. The men Carlos worked with were led by a man called El Serpiente, the same man who killed my missionary companions." She paused, her breathing shaky. "Carlos became involved in their raids, their murders. He told me it was temporary, that once we had enough money, he would break free of them. But I knew better. I could see how the violence was changing him." Jeremiah guided his horse round a cluster of boulders, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for signs of pursuit. "So you killed him?" "No." The word came out sharp and final. "I loved my brother, Mr. Stone. Despite everything he had become, he was still the boy who taught me to ride, who protected me from our father's rages, who held me when our mother died." "Then who did?" "El Serpiente." Carlos tried to leave the gang, just as I had begged him to do. He had finally saved enough money to pay off our father's debts and wanted to return to being a simple rancher, but El Serpiente would not let him go. They fought, and El Serpiente killed him, but the bounty. I was there when it happened. I had come to plead with Carlos one last time to abandon his criminal life. When El Serpiente shot my brother, I lost my mind with grief and rage. I picked up Carlos's gun and tried to kill the man who had murdered him. Jeremiah nodded, the pieces falling into place. You missed. I had never fired a gun before. The bullet went wide, but in the confusion, I managed to escape. El Serpiente told the authorities that I had killed Carlos, that the wound in his body came from my gun. With Carlos dead, there was no one to contradict his story, so you became a nun. I fled to a convent near the border. The Mother Superior there was a kind woman who asked no questions about my past. I took vows and became Sister Magdalena, dedicating my life to God as penance for my family's sins. They rode until evening, when Jeremiah found another secluded spot to make camp. This time he chose a place with good visibility in all directions and multiple escape routes. Sister Magdalena helped gather firewood, moving with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned not to waste motion. You blame yourself for your brother's death, Jeremiah observed as they shared a simple meal of beans and hardtack. If I had been stronger, if I had convinced him to leave earlier. He made his own choices, sister. You can't carry the weight of another person's decisions. Sister Magdalena stared into the small fire. The night before he died, Carlos came to see me at the convent. He told me he was going to break free of El Serpiente's gang, that he was tired of the killing and wanted to be the man our mother had raised him to be. She wiped tears from her eyes. I told him it was too late, that God could not forgive what he had done. I turned him away, and you think that's why he died. I think that if I had shown him the mercy and forgiveness that Christ commands, he might have found the strength to leave sooner. My coldness, my judgment, it may have cost him his life. Jeremiah poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Or maybe your honesty gave him the push he needed to finally do the right thing. Maybe he died because he was trying to become a better man, not because you failed him. Sister Magdalena looked at him with surprise. That is a remarkably compassionate view for a man who makes his living with violence. I've seen enough death to know that it comes for all of us eventually. The only thing that matters is what we do with the time we have. And what have you done with your time, Mr. Stone? The question hung in the air between them. Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands turning his coffee cup slowly. I've killed bad men, he said finally. I've protected people who couldn't protect themselves. I've tried to leave places better than I found them. And do you believe that's enough to balance the scales of judgment? Don't know about scales or judgment, sister. I just know that every man I've killed needed killing, and every person I've helped might have died if I hadn't been there. Sister Magdalena pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. The desert night was growing cold, and the small fire provided little warmth. I envy you your certainty. What do you mean? You seem to know exactly who you are and what your purpose is. I thought I was called to serve God, to help the poor and innocent. But now, she gestured helplessly. Now I don't know what I believe anymore. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. How can you say that? Jeremiah leaned back against his saddle, his eyes fixed on the stars above. When I was a young man, I thought I knew everything. I was certain about right and wrong, about who deserved to live and who deserved to die. That certainty nearly got me killed more than once. What changed? I started listening more and talking less. Started paying attention to the gray areas between black and white. He looked at her across the fire. Maybe your doubt is God's way of teaching you something new. Sister Magdalena shook her head. God does not teach through doubt. He teaches through faith, through love, through whatever means he chooses. Jeremiah interrupted gently. You told me yourself that your brother tried to change at the end. What made him want to do that? I don't know. Maybe it was seeing the pain his choices caused you. Maybe it was understanding that there was still someone who loved him, despite everything he'd done wrong. Jeremiah's voice was soft in the firelight. Maybe God used your love to try to save your brother's soul, even if he couldn't save his life. The words hit Sister Magdalena like a physical blow. She had never considered that possibility that Carlos's final attempt at redemption might have been inspired by her love rather than hindered by her judgment. "I need to think," she said, rising abruptly and walking to the edge of their camp. Jeremiah let her go, understanding the need for solitude when wrestling with difficult truths. He kept watch through the long night, his ears tuned for any sound that might indicate pursuit while his mind turned over their conversation. The next morning brought clear skies and the promise of another scorching day. They broke camp early and continued their journey toward Santa Fe, riding through landscape that grew increasingly desolate as they climbed into the higher desert. "Mr. Stone," Sister Magdalena said as they paused to rest their horse beside a small spring, "if what you said last night is true, if God can work through doubt and questioning, then perhaps he can work through violence as well." Jeremiah looked up from refilling their water bottles. What are you getting at, sister?" "El Serpiente killed my brother. He killed the missionaries I was traveling with. He has undoubtedly killed many others." Her dark eyes were steady, resolved. "Someone needs to stop him. That's not your burden to carry, isn't it? If I have knowledge that could help bring him to justice, don't I have a responsibility to act on it?" Jeremiah corked the water bottles and tied them to his saddle. "Justice and revenge aren't the same thing, sister. I know that. But I also know that allowing evil to continue when you have the power to stop it is itself a form of evil." She mounted behind him with more confidence than she had shown before. "I want to help you find El Serpiente. That's not why I bought you from Blackwood." "Then why did you?" The question was simple, but Jeremiah found himself struggling to answer it. He had told himself it was simple compassion, the same impulse that had led him to defend other innocents over the years. But looking back on that moment in Esperanza's town square, he realized there had been something more. "I saw you standing there," he said finally, "and I saw someone who refused to be broken, even chained and put up for auction. You held your head high, that kind of strength." He paused, searching for the right words. "That kind of strength deserves to be free." Sister Magdalena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Is that what you're looking for, Mr. Stone? Freedom? What do you mean? You carry yourself like a man in chains, even though no one has power over you. You speak of purpose and duty, but I see weariness in your eyes. You save others, but who saves you?" The observation was more perceptive than Jeremiah was comfortable with. He had spent so many years building walls around his inner life that having someone see through them was unsettling. "Don't need saving, sister. Everyone needs saving from something. The question is whether we're brave enough to admit what we need to be saved from." They rode in thoughtful silence for several miles, the desert heat building around them like a living thing. Sister Magdalena found herself studying the man who had bought her freedom, noting details she had missed before. The way his eyes never stopped moving, always watching for threats. The careful way he positioned himself between her and any potential danger. The gentleness in his hands when he helped her mount and dismount, despite the calluses and scars that spoke of a lifetime of violence. "Mr. Stone," she said as they crested a ridge that offered a view of the valley below, "may I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Have you ever been married?" Jeremiah's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "Once." "What happened?" "She died." The simple words carried a weight of pain that made Sister Magdalena regret asking the question. But Jeremiah continued, his voice low and distant. "Her name was Catherine. We met in Colorado before I took up gunfighting as a profession. She was a school teacher, daughter of the local pastor, sweetest woman you ever saw, with a laugh that could light up a room." "How did she die?" "The Comancheros raided the town while I was away on business. They killed most of the men and took the women and children." His voice grew harder. "By the time I got back and organized a rescue party, it was too late. We found her body 3 days later." Sister Magdalena felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm sorry. That's when I became what I am now. Spent the next 2 years hunting down every man who had been part of that raid. When I was done, there wasn't a Comanchero left alive within 500 miles. And did it help?" Did killing them bring you peace?" Jeremiah was quiet for so long that Sister Magdalena thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the sound of their horses' hooves. No, it didn't bring her back, and it didn't fill the hole she left behind. But it made sure no other woman would suffer what she suffered at their hands. Is that why you continue? To protect others from experiencing your loss, maybe. Or maybe I just don't know how to be anything else anymore. Sister Magdalena found herself reaching out to touch his shoulder, offering what comfort she could. God can make all things new, Mr. Stone, even broken men and broken nuns, especially broken nuns. They made camp that evening in the ruins of an old adobe church, its walls still standing, but its roof long since collapsed. Sister Magdalena wandered among the remains while Jeremiah tended to their horse, running her fingers along carved stone that had once been an altar. "This was beautiful once," she said softly. Jeremiah looked up from his work. "Still is, in its way." "How can you say that? It's nothing but rubble and weeds." "Look closer, sister." She did, and gradually began to see what he meant. Despite decades of abandonment, the basic structure remained sound. Wildflowers had grown up through cracks in the floor, their bright colors a stark contrast to the weathered stone. A family of doves had made their nest in what had once been the bell tower, their soft cooing a kind of natural hymn. "Even broken things can have beauty," Jeremiah said, joining her among the ruins. "Even broken things can serve a purpose." Sister Magdalena knelt and picked up a fragment of colored glass that had once been part of a stained window, held up to the fading sunlight. It still cast jeweled patterns on the stone floor. "I used to believe that faith meant never doubting, never questioning," she said. "I thought that to serve God properly, I had to be perfect, unblemished, certain of everything. And now I think maybe God can use broken glass to make something beautiful." She let the fragment fall from her fingers. Maybe he can use broken people too. That night, for the first time since leaving Esperanza, Sister Magdalena slept peacefully. Her dreams were not of death and auction blocks, but of light streaming through windows, even cracked ones. The next morning brought visitors once again, but these were not Blackwood's men. A small group of Apache warriors emerged from the desert like ghosts, their faces painted for war. Jeremiah counted 6 of them, all armed with rifles in addition to their traditional weapons. "Don't move," he murmured to Sister Magdalena. "Let me handle this." The Apache leader, a man with gray threading through his long black hair, rode forward until he was close enough to speak without shouting. His English was accented but clear. "You are the one they call Stone," he said. It was not a question. I am Cochise of the Kirikahua. We have heard stories of you." Jeremiah nodded respectfully. Cochise was a legend in this part of the country, a war chief who had fought both Mexican and American forces for decades. That he was still alive and free spoke to his skill and cunning. "What brings you to parley with me?" "Chief, the woman you travel with. She is wanted by the men who killed my nephew." Sister Magdalena felt her heart sink. Even here, hundreds of miles from where her troubles had begun, the past was catching up with her. "The woman is under my protection," Jeremiah said carefully. "I do not doubt your skill, Stone, but you are only one man." Cochise's eyes were hard as flint. "The men who seek her have offered a bounty to anyone who brings her to them. They say she murdered one of their own. It's a lie, perhaps, but lies can be as dangerous as truth when spoken by powerful men." Cochise studied Sister Magdalena with curious eyes. "You are the holy woman who tried to teach our children?" Sister Magdalena found her voice. "Yes, I was traveling to establish a school near the border. My people have spoken of such things. Some believe the white man's God might have wisdom to offer our young ones." His expression softened slightly. "Others believe that any teaching which comes with soldiers and traitors brings only sorrow. I bring no soldiers," Sister Magdalena said. "Only books and hope." Cochise nodded slowly. "The men who killed your missionary friends also killed my nephew. He was hunting near the border when they found him. They tortured him for information about Apache movements, then left his body for the vultures." Sister Magdalena gasped. "I'm sorry for your loss, as I am sorry for yours." Kochai's voice carried the weight of shared grief. These men, led by the one called El Serpiente, have brought much pain to both our peoples. Jeremiah felt a spark of hope. You know where to find them? They have a stronghold in the Dragun Mountains, 3 days' ride south of here. It is well defended, with many men and much ammunition. Kochai paused, his weathered face thoughtful. But perhaps, if we were to work together. What are you proposing? My warriors know the land. You know the ways of the white man's fighting. The woman knows the face of our enemy. Kochai looked between them. Separately, we might all fail. Together, we might succeed in bringing justice to those who have wronged us. Sister Magdalena stepped forward. Chief Kochai, I appreciate your offer, but I cannot ask you to risk your warriors' lives for my personal vendetta. This is not personal vendetta, holy woman. This is justice for all the innocent blood that has been spilled. His eyes grew hard. El Serpiente and his men have raided Apache camps, killed our women and children, stolen our horses. They have murdered missionaries and travelers. They are a plague upon this land. Jeremiah studied the Apache leader's face, reading the sincerity there. What do you have in mind? There is a canyon that leads to their stronghold. Only one way, in or out. If we could trap them there. Kochai smiled grimly. Even the fastest gun cannot shoot in all directions at once. It's a trap. Sister Magdalena said quietly. They'll be expecting something like this. All battles are traps, sister, Jeremiah replied. The question is who springs theirs first. That afternoon, they rode with Kochai and his warriors toward the Dragun Mountains. Sister Magdalena found herself between two worlds, the violent world of her protector and the warrior culture of the Apache. Both were foreign to her upbringing, yet both showed her aspects of honor and justice that her sheltered convent life had never revealed. As they traveled, Kochai told them more about El Serpiente's operation. The bandit leader had built his stronghold in an abandoned mining camp, using the old buildings and mine shafts as defensive positions. His gang had grown to nearly 30 men, all of them hardened killers drawn by the promise of easy money from raids on both sides of the border. He has grown bold, Kochai explained as they made camp in a hidden valley. To bold. He believes his numbers make him invincible. Numbers don't mean much if you can't use them effectively, Jeremiah observed. What's the layout of this stronghold? Using sticks and stones. Kochai drew a rough map in the dirt. The mining camp sat at the end of a narrow canyon, with steep walls on 3 sides and only one entrance. It was a naturally defensive position, but it was also a trap for anyone inside if the entrance could be blocked. There, Kochai pointed to a spot on his crude map. A rock slide here would seal the canyon, but someone would need to get inside first to drive them into position. Sister Magdalena studied the map with growing unease. You're talking about a suicide mission. Not suicide, Jeremiah said. Just dangerous. The difference being that I plan to survive it. That night, as the Apache warriors maintained their silent watch, Jeremiah and Sister Magdalena sat apart from the others. The nun had grown increasingly quiet as the reality of their situation settled upon her. I never intended for this to happen, she said softly. When I took my vows, I thought I was choosing a life of peace and service. Instead, I've brought violence and death to everyone around me. You didn't bring this violence. Sister, it was already here, waiting for you to stumble into it. Jeremiah poked at their small fire with a stick. Question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know anymore. I used to think I knew God's will, that I could see his plan in everything that happened. But now, she pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Now I wonder if I ever really knew him at all. Maybe that's the point. What do you mean? Maybe God doesn't want you to know his will. Maybe he wants you to choose your own path and trust that he'll be there to guide you when you need it. Sister Magdalena looked at him in surprise. That's a very sophisticated theological position for a gunfighter. I told you I knew a preacher once. He used to say that faith without choice isn't faith at all, it's just obedience. Jeremiah met her gaze across the fire. What do you choose, sister? Do you choose to let evil continue because fighting it might dirty your hands? Or do you choose to act, even if it means questioning everything you thought you believed." The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sister Magdalena found herself thinking of Carlos, of the missionaries who had died, of Chief Cochise' nephew and all the other innocent victims of El Serpient's cruelty. "I choose to act," she said finally, "but I don't know if that makes me a better Christian or a worse one. Maybe it just makes you human." The next morning brought the final phase of their journey. As they approached the Dragon Mountains, the landscape grew more rugged and forbidding. Towering spires of red rock jutted from the desert floor like ancient monuments, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with the heat and tension of impending violence. Cochise called a halt when they were still several miles from the canyon entrance. "From here, we must proceed with great care. El Serpiente has sentries posted on the high rocks." Jeremiah studied the terrain through his field glasses, noting the positions of the lookouts. 2 men on the north ridge, 1 on the south. They're watching the main approaches, but they're not expecting anyone to come from the east. "The east approach is treacherous," Cochise warned. "Many loose rocks, very steep. One mistake and you fall to your death. Then we better not make any mistakes." They spent the remainder of the day planning their assault. Cochise's warriors would position themselves to trigger the rock slide that would seal the canyon. But they needed someone inside to drive El Serpiente and his men into the kill zone. That someone would have to be Jeremiah. "I'm going with you," Sister Magdalena announced as they finalized their plans. "No, you're not." "Yes, I am. You'll need someone to identify El Serpiente in the confusion of battle. I'm the only one here who's seen his face up close." Jeremiah started to argue, but Cochise interrupted. "The woman speaks wisdom. In battle, seconds can mean the difference between victory and defeat. If she can point out your target, she's not a warrior. She'll get herself killed." "I may not be a warrior," Sister Magdalena said firmly, "but I'm not helpless. I've spent the last 3 years working with the poor and sick in dangerous places. I know how to keep my head in a crisis." Jeremiah looked into her dark eyes and saw the same determination that had impressed him on the auction block in Esperanza. Whatever else she might be, Sister Magdalena was not a woman who could be easily dissuaded once she had made up her mind. "Fine," he said finally, "but you stay behind me at all times, and you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. Understood?" "Understood." As night fell, Jeremiah and Sister Magdalena began their treacherous climb up the eastern face of the canyon. The rocks were loose and treacherous, just as Cochise had warned, and more than once they had to freeze in place as stones clattered down the slope below them. Sister Magdalena found herself praying as she climbed, not the formal prayers of her liturgy but desperate, wordless pleas for strength and guidance. Her hands were cut and bleeding from the sharp rocks, and her habit was torn in a dozen places. But she pressed on with grim determination. When they finally reached the rim of the canyon, Jeremiah pulled out his field glasses and studied the camp below. El Serpient's stronghold was exactly as Cochise had described, a collection of ramshackle buildings clustered around the entrance to an old mine shaft. Campfires dotted the area, and armed men moved between the structures with the casual confidence of those who believed themselves safe. "There," Sister Magdalena whispered, pointing to a figure near the largest building. "That's him." Jeremiah adjusted his glasses and focused on the man she had indicated. El Serpiente was tall and lean, with the distinctive scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. Even at this distance, there was something predatory about the way he moved, like a wolf surveying his territory. "You sure?" "I'm sure. That's the man who killed my brother and my friends." Jeremiah studied the layout of the camp, counting men and noting their positions. 23 that I can see. Maybe more in the buildings. Can we do this? We can try." He put away the field glasses and checked his weapons one final time. "Remember, stay close and do what I tell you." They began their descent into the canyon, moving like shadows in the darkness. Jeremiah's years of experience served him well. He knew how to place his feet to avoid loose stones, how to use the terrain for concealment, how to move without making sound. Sister Magdalena followed his lead, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the sentries would hear it. But her fear was balanced by a growing sense of righteous purpose. She was no longer the sheltered nun who had been captured by bandits. She was a woman seeking justice for the innocent dead. They reached the floor of the canyon without being detected and took cover behind a stack of old mining equipment. From here, they could see the entire camp spread out before them. Men sat around fires, drinking and laughing, completely unaware of the danger approaching from above. Jeremiah pulled out his pocket watch and checked the time. In exactly 10 minutes, Coach Eyes and his warriors would trigger the rock slide that would seal the canyon entrance. Everything depended on timing. When the shooting starts, he whispered to Sister Magdalena, "You get behind that or cart and stay there until it's over. Don't try to be a hero. What about you?" "I'm going to do what I do best." The 10 minutes stretched like hours. Sister Magdalena found herself studying the faces of the men around the campfires, noting their youth and the hardness in their eyes. How many innocent people had these men killed? How many families had they destroyed? Then, with a rumble like thunder, the rock slide began. Tons of stone crashed down across the canyon entrance, sending up a cloud of dust that obscured half the camp. Men shouted in alarm and confusion, grabbing for their weapons as they tried to understand what was happening. In the chaos, Jeremiah struck. His first shot took down the sentry nearest to their position, the man falling silently with a bullet through his heart. His second and third shots found 2 more targets before the camp fully realized they were under attack. "We're trapped," someone shouted. "The entrance is blocked. It's an ambush." El Serpient's voice cut through the confusion like a blade. "Form a defensive line. Find cover." But Jeremiah was already moving, using the darkness and confusion to his advantage. He rolled behind a water trough as bullets began to fly, then came up shooting. 2 more men fell, and the rest began to panic. Sister Magdalena crouched behind the cart as Jeremiah had instructed, but she couldn't help watching the deadly dance unfolding before her. The gunfighter moved like a ghost, appearing from one position to fire a few shots, then vanishing before return fire could find him. El Serpiente was shouting orders, trying to organize his men, but the surprise attack had scattered them. Some had taken cover behind buildings, others had fled toward the mine shaft, and still others were running in circles, firing wildly at shadows. From above, Coach Eyes' warriors added their own deadly, accurate fire to the battle. Apache marksmanship was legendary, and they made every shot count. The bandits found themselves caught in a crossfire with no way to escape. There, El Serpiente spotted Jeremiah's muzzle flash and directed his remaining men toward the gunfighter's position. "Kill him." A hail of bullets shattered the water trough Jeremiah was using for cover, forcing him to roll away. He came up behind a pile of lumber, but El Serpiente had anticipated the move. The bandit leader's rifle cracked, and Jeremiah felt the bullet crease his left shoulder. Sister Magdalena saw him stagger and felt her heart leap into her throat. Without thinking, she grabbed a rock and hurled it at El Serpiente, striking him in the back of the head. The bandit leader spun around, his scarred face twisted with rage. "The nun, she's here." He raised his rifle toward Sister Magdalena, but Jeremiah's Colt spoke first. The bullet took El Serpiente in the chest, spinning him around. He stayed on his feet for a moment, looking down at the spreading stain on his shirt with surprise, then collapsed. The death of their leader broke the remaining bandits' will to fight. Some threw down their weapons and surrendered, while others tried to flee deeper into the canyon, only to be cut down by Apache rifles. In less than 20 minutes, it was over. Jeremiah walked among the bodies, checking each one to make sure there would be no unpleasant surprises. His left shoulder was bleeding, but the wound was minor. Sister Magdalena approached El Serpient's body with slow, careful steps. "It's finished," she said softly, looking down at the man who had caused so much pain and death. "It's finished." Jeremiah agreed, but as he said the words, he realized that something else was beginning. The woman who had stood on the auction block in Esperanza was gone, replaced by someone stronger and more complex. Sister Magdalena had confronted her past and chosen her own path, even when that path led through violence and doubt. Coach Eyes and his warriors descended into the canyon to help with the aftermath. The Apache leader surveyed the scene with satisfaction. then approached Jeremiah and Sister Magdalena. "It is done," he said simply. "Justice has been served." "What happens now?" Sister Magdalena asked. "Now you are free," Cowboys replied. "Free from the past, free from those who would use your pain against you. What you do with that freedom is your choice." As they prepared to leave the canyon, Sister Magdalena found herself standing once again among ruins, but this time, the ruins were of her own making. She had chosen to act, to fight back against the evil that had destroyed so many innocent lives. In doing so, she had discovered something about herself and about the God she served. "Mr. Stone," she said as they mounted their horses for the journey back to the outside world, "I don't think I want to go to the convent in Santa Fe." "Where do you want to go?" "I want to go back to the border. I want to build that school for the Apache children, the one we were trying to establish when we were attacked." She looked at Cowboys, who nodded his approval. "But I want to do it differently this time. I want to teach them not just about God's love, but about God's justice, about the importance of standing up to evil, even when it's dangerous." "That's a hard road, sister." "Yes, it is. But I think it's the road God wants me to walk." She paused, then added, "I hope you'll consider staying. To help, the children could use a teacher who understands both justice and mercy." Jeremiah looked at her with surprise. "You want a gunfighter to teach children?" "I want a man who understands the cost of violence to teach them when it's necessary, and when it's not. I want someone who has seen both the worst and best of humanity, to help them navigate the complexities of life." She smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, the expression reached her eyes. "I want my friend to help me build something good from the ashes of all this destruction." As they rode away from the canyon, Sister Magdalena felt a sense of peace she had not experienced since before her brother's death. Her faith had been tested, shaken, and ultimately transformed. She no longer believed in a God who demanded blind obedience, but in one who called his people to make difficult choices and trust in his guidance. The sun was setting as they reached the valley where they had camped the night before. Tomorrow they would begin the journey back to the border, back to the place where Sister Magdalena would build her school, and Jeremiah would perhaps find a new purpose beyond the gun. "Do you really think we can do it?" she asked as they watched the last light fade from the sky. "Build something lasting and good. I think we can try," Jeremiah replied. "And sometimes trying is enough." Sister Magdalena nodded, pulling her torn and dusty habit around her shoulders. She was no longer the same woman who had been put up for auction in Esperanza. She had been broken and remade, tested and found strong. Her faith had been challenged and had emerged deeper and more complex than before. As she looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, she offered a prayer of thanksgiving, not for the violence they had just survived, but for the choices they had been given and the strength to make them. In the morning, they would begin building something new, something that honored both the dead and the living. The desert wind whispered through the canyon walls, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings and the hope that even in the darkest places, light could be found by those brave enough to seek it. Now that you've watched the full story, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and ensure we're bringing you the kind of storytelling you truly enjoy.